Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Orthodox Review, the most uneducated educational program on the internet. I'm your host, the guy with 1.5 thumbs, and I'm very happy that you are joining me today. Hey! Quick shout out to all my patrons. You guys rock. Thank you so very much for your support. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click on the links below. Patreon, PayPal, yada, yada, yada. Now that that's out of the way, let's get with the good. So I hope you're all enjoying a fast-free week. This is that magical time of year, Pentecost week, when we start to settle back into what we call normal life, which is usually the two calendars going their separate ways and arguing for another year before coming together finally again in Lent. So enjoy your meat and cheese, y'all. A little froggy today, but anyway, okay, so let's get into this. Christ the Conqueror of Hell, The Descent into Hades from an Orthodox Perspective by Metropolitan Hilarion Alfev, published by SVS in 2009. Bought this book on a lark. Apparently, I was out of the loop for many years, didn't know the book existed, and then once I posted that I got the book for review, people went, well, they didn't go ballistic, but people were very interested in what I had to say about the book, and so that just got me even more curious to read it, so I read it. I dissected it, I pulled it apart, and in my own barely educated sort of high school flunky sort of way, have come up with a few words to say about this fine book. And so let's go with that. Right. Yeah, so I actually wrote a script, so bear with me. I'm not good at script reading, folks. I'm not a radio announcer. Anyway, okay, so though not an encyclical, Christ the Conqueror of Hell is a fantastic insight into the deep liturgical, dogmatic, and poetic roots of the Orthodox understanding of the harrowing of Hades. At times, Metropolitan Hilarion skirts the edges of a few enticing little rabbit holes of history, especially of the saints, but always comes back to the main focus, and in this way he arms the reader with the proper context for studying the works he cites. So let's take a brief look at the book. Now, even though the book is in 2 parts, it's really in 4 sections plus an epilogue, which, yeah, take it or leave it. We are not going to cover the epilogue or any of that. That's more big brain stuff that I didn't feel that I was qualified to expound on. So in this, it's part 1, part 2, sections 1, 2, 3, and 4. In my notes, it's just 4 parts. So right away, let's jump into part 1, which begins on page 17, and it's mostly apocryphal text, that sort of stuff, and really focuses on the earliest sources, and those being the New Testament, early poetry, and apocryphal literature. It's worth noting that the great extent of apocryphal sources explored, and Metropolitan Hilarion is pretty keen to avoid Gnostic sources, which is nice. It's a great comfort, but special attention is paid to the Greek and Syriac traditions, in which what he calls the Paschal faith is firmly set in by the 2nd century, and even the Paschal Troparion, as we know it today, is already in regular use by the end of that time. Now, let's get back to part 2, which I don't remember pages. One thing I do love, sidebar, so many texts in here, and we're going to go over a few of those in a bit. Part 2, and I'm sorry I'm so unprepared. Part 2, page 43. All right. So I was already there. Anyway, let's just talk about this. So part 2 draws from the patristic tradition and shows the natural evolution of the poetic sources, as well as the rise of Origen, everyone's favorite public topic of debate, outside of cookies, the anti-heretical works of Irenaeus, and the extensive works of St. Augustine. Now, one of the biggest sources he cites in there is The Suffering of Christ by Gregory Nazianzen, and it's also explored as it presents the descent as a redemptive fact, and it's really in that first work he shows that in that particular work that he shows where our liturgical texts are going to be headed, and where the theology of those texts really solidified in its core. Part 3 focuses entirely on the works of St. Ephrem the Syrian and St. Romanos the Melodist. Yee. Nerd moment. And of great interest here is the importance of St. Ephrem's ability to marry the Syriac poetic tradition to the Byzantine liturgical tradition, and the impact his work had on his contemporaries, the most notable of which, of course, is St. Romanos. So in the life and work of St. Romanos, then, we're shown, his amazing Conqueror and the evolution of our modern hymnography from that work. And going back to St. Ephrem, there are not a whole lot of English translations of St. Ephrem's work. So to have complete translations in English of hymns 36, 38, this is so cool, and major portions of other hymns is so rad to have on hand. If you're a fan of St. Ephrem's work and even St. Romanos' work and are looking for some English sources that you might not usually find outside of maybe some collegiate texts, oh man, this is actually just a great book to get just for that, worth the cover price alone. And then once we get through all this delicious hymnography, because the bulk of the book from here on out is really just liturgical texts. Part 4, liturgical texts in the Orthodox Church. Now he does talk about how our tradition evolved from the 7th to 9th century to what we have today, and most hymnography that we use today was established then. Part 4 is almost entirely compiled of our current liturgical hymns, and used it as example and culmination of the 2,000 years of proclaiming Christ's triumph over sin and the grave, even to the harrowing of Hades. That's what I wrote down here on the paper. Final thoughts on the book. Though the book does present the reader with some insight into our Orthodox beliefs about the title subject, that being Christ the Conqueror of Hell, the harrowing of Hades, it focuses plainly the poetic and liturgical expression of those beliefs. And as a lover of our church's hymns, that suits me just fine. And seeing as Metropolitan Hilarion is a composer, among other things, it's probably safe to assume that this was his intention all along. He is my kind of nerd, ladies and gentlemen. This is, it's not correctly titled. I don't think he chose this title. I think the title is wrong, but the book is fantastic. It's a neat little, and it's, I'm not going to say it's pedestrian. It's great for idiots like me who have a hard time reading the big brain stuff. So if you were at all interested in not necessarily the theology of the subject, but the history of our music and that tradition, and just a good chunk of old school Syriac poetry, pick this bad boy up. You will not be disappointed. At any rate, I'm going to leave it. I'm tired. I've got like 8 pages of notes that I had to boil this down from, so I'm shot. Gonna get me a cup of coffee and enjoy my day off. And well, you hung out this long. If you were wondering, there she is. So, on behalf of Spooky Cat and myself, please continue to pray. We got riots, we got viruses, we got, well, I guess no one's really talking about those killer bee things anymore, the murder wasps. But there's a lot going on out there. And hymns, prayers, that's where it's at, folks. So please remember to go to church, say your prayers, and remember God. God bless.